Hey, folks. Hope you're having a good week. This is Resurrection Letter number 10, and I hope that these have been good, useful for your life, thoughtful for your faith, that kind of thing. But here we go, Resurrection Letter number 10. Dear Good Shepherd and friends, I've been thinking about our lives. I often think in terms of song lyrics, which is just that I listen to enough music that often song lyrics come into my mind when I'm thinking about things. They provide the language, sometimes a point of connection for thinking about stuff. That in the Bible, but sometimes song lyrics win out. There's a lyric by a rock band named Guardian, and the song is titled, Are We Feeling Comfortable Yet? The lyric goes like this. Pondering death is a dirty biz. Makes you wonder when your appointment is. Shift to the left, shift to the right, fidget, lock your knees, cough, cough, fidget, don't scratch, don't break down in sweat. Are we feeling comfortable yet? The song captures the uncomfortability we often have when we honestly face up to the reality of our death. We fidget, we get uncomfortable. We want to dodge the subject. We want to get on with our lives and live a happy life and not worry about death. Another perspective is that unless you really face the reality of your death, you won't really live your life well. I tend to agree with that perspective. There's another song or in the musical Rent, called Seasons of Love, and the song goes like this. 525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? 525,600. That's the minutes we have in a year of life. Do the math and you can calculate how many minutes you have left for X amount of years left of life. Sometimes I think of life in terms of Saturdays. I'm in my 45th year of life, and let's say I live to the year 70. That means I have about 1,300 Saturdays left. 1,300 Saturdays. That's not a lot. How many Saturdays do you have left? Are we feeling comfortable yet? So here's my statement for living life wisely in the face of my and your end. In my time on this earth, I refuse to accept this world's terms for living. In my time on this earth, I refuse to accept this world's terms for living life. Think of the language of our money market system in our culture. The principle is to invest your money in the things that will yield the greatest return. So if we're made for more than this one life, and if this life is, like Jesus says, more than just what we will eat, what we will drink, and what we will wear, then it makes sense that how we invest our lives should be in the things that yield the greatest return, not in the temporary things of this world. Let me put it another way. If when we die, we take nothing with us that we've worked for, nothing that we've accumulated, all of our accomplishments, all of our investments, everything we've done, nothing goes with us when we die, then it makes sense then that maybe we should not invest so much in something that will not yield a return. Or put it another way, if our allegiances, our groups, our tribes, our attempts to distinguish ourselves from others, and our systems of evaluation in this world, the ways we use to judge ourselves and others, if in the next life there are no such things, no Americans, no conservatives, no liberals, no small town versus that small town, no rich, no poor, no smart or dumb, no athletic or less athletic, then why, if none of that stuff exists in the next life and none of it really matters in the end, then why do we spend so much of our time and our energies building our lives according to these arbitrary ideals and categories? The things that we invest our time and our energies and much of our lives in this life, according to the world's terms, are often remarkably short-sighted. Not only that, but I often wonder who sets the terms anyway. Who decides what a good quality of life is? Who sets the standards? I've often wondered this since high school. Like back in school, who decided who the cool kids were and who the not cool kids were? Who decided who was in the popular group and the unpopular group? Who makes those decisions? Who sets those arbitrary standards? And even after school, we're often told that when you get out of school and you grow up and become an adult, all that stuff goes away and you move past it. But the reality is that when we become adults, we don't move past that stuff. Sometimes it becomes even more entrenched. And by osmosis, we pass this stuff on to our kids. The cycle never stops. The real problem is we generally live our lives according to these arbitrary rules and decisions and systems, these things that we make up for setting ourselves apart from one another, for evaluating quality of life. But in reality, it's just arbitrary stuff that doesn't matter. I refuse to accept those terms for living in my 1,300 or so Saturdays I have left. Our behaviors follow the patterns and follow where our investments are. Jesus put it a different way in Matthew 6. Where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. If we're concerned with making money and making an impression on others in this life, that we have the good life, or if we're concerned with trying to impress those around us with our accomplishments, chasing after the things our particular culture sells us, busying ourselves with work, setting ourselves apart from others according to some arbitrary standards and value systems, then this is where our behaviors will be patterned too. And we'll treat ourselves and other people according to these evaluations and these standards of living that really don't matter. The message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is not a nice, feel-good message about getting to heaven when you die. It's supposed to turn our world upside down, precisely because in our humanity we have everything backwards. And God isn't content with us having everything backwards. He loves us too much. I like how Jesus puts things when he tells stories. There's a parable in Luke 12 about a farmer who built this barn. This farmer was spending all his energies building his fortune. More product, a bigger barn, a life of luxury. Then he died. And all the stuff he had spent his time on became someone else's junk. What did he gain in the end? What good was it? What was the return from his investment? Nothing. Or sometimes I think of how the Apostle Paul questions the wisdom of the world in 1 Corinthians. According to the world's wisdom in Paul's time, certain people with certain credentials and qualifications have a higher status than others, are seen as more important. Paul calls a foul on that. Not only that, but he scoffs at that way of thinking. He calls it foolishness. He says that the wisdom of the world in this way of thinking actually blinds our humanity to knowing who God is. And it blinds us from knowing who we are. Christianity, my friends, is not Jesus plus cultural values equals the good life. The gospel, Christianity, is this. Jesus blows up everything we think. If you're not uncomfortable, you don't get Jesus. That's what the gospel's about, really. Pulling the cultural and social value systems that we stand on out from under our feet. Because everything we stand on is dead, going nowhere. We all know it. Yet we refuse to be courageous enough to walk away from it. Just as in raising Jesus from the dead, God rejected the terms of death as the only realistic option, so also in his life, Jesus rejects the terms of living set by the world as the only viable option for a good life. And then he says, "Follow me." This is the best life. This is resurrection living. I want to use my 1,300 Saturdays I have left wisely. which means that I reject the terms of living set by our human short-sightedness in our cultural frameworks. I want to align with Jesus, period. I don't do it perfectly, but I want it to be the thing I pursue, the thing that marks my life, the investment that I put all of my energy and time into, because that's the thing that will give the greatest return in the end. And I want my kids to do the same. I want my children to see above and beyond our arbitrary standards for living, to see life according to what Jesus gives us, life according to what matters. And I want this for my church. I want this for you. I want to challenge you and your family to do the same. So what's the alternative, you ask? Read the Gospels. Take Jesus seriously. Jesus says it best. Love your neighbor as yourself. Invest in that. Take as much time investing in time spent with your spouse, your kids, your friends, and yes, even your enemies. Learn to love them. Put your intent and investment and your energies into that. Because this, my friends, is what will yield the greatest return. This matters more than your work. This matters more than your accomplishments. This matters more than your games and your toys. In doing this, this is where we truly find life. Invest in that today, friends. In Defiant Hope, Pastor Kyle.